So I have here my reproduction flywheel that I picked up at O'Reilly's, and just basic kind of steps to putting your flywheel on. You need to, one, when you take it out, you need to make sure your hands are clean, which mine are, they could use some work. But make sure that you don't get any grease or anything on this surface right here. Now, when you get the flywheel initially, it's going to have a kind of a grease on it already. They put that on to prevent rust while it's being stored in between manufacturing and when you install it. And when you buy it, brand new at least, it comes in this plastic covering. This way it doesn't rust or anything. You get no air, no moisture in there. And so if you get a used flywheel, you need to get this surface remachined down so that it's perfectly smooth. There's no rust on it whatsoever. But if you get a new one, it's going to be smooth already, but you will have to clean it off to make sure that it's perfectly clean when you're installing it. Because if you get any grease in there between your flywheel and your clutch there, or your pressure plate, you're going to have a lot of slip. You don't want to do that, so just keep it clean, and then you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so I got my flywheel all cleaned up now with my rag here. It got actually surprising amount of grease that's on there. It's pretty filthy. But when you're putting this flywheel on, you should always use brand new bolts for it, so that when you torque them or tension them, and that way the threads aren't going to be willing to give out on you. With a used bolt, your threads are more likely to strip, and if you lose one as you're driving, that's going to go right into your clutch, and that's not good. So go ahead and get new bolts right away, and always use Loctite. That's another manufacturer's recommendation. And I already looked up the torque on it, and so when you torque this down, you want to use a star pattern. So just, yeah, you know that. But make sure that you go, it's 60 foot-pounds that you want to torque it to. So for me, the way I'm going to do this, I'm not sure if this is right, but I'm going to put them all on hand tight and then go 20 foot-pounds in the star pattern, 40 in the star pattern, 60 in the star pattern, and then double check that to 60 again, just to make sure that they're all tightened down equally and evenly, so that I don't have any problems with the flywheel being uneven on the engine and getting a little bit of vibration in there, because you don't want that. I'm going to take this one more quick opportunity to talk about the rear main seal and how it's different depending on which year your block was, if there's a break on the serial number. So anyways, the rear main seal on my block here is a one-piece seal. You can see it's one solid piece all the way around. Basically, so the crankshaft here is going to come out, and there's going to be a 3-inch bolt pattern across. And that's completely different from the two-piece rear main seal that has a 3 5/8 rear crankshaft bolt pattern. So the difference being is they didn't want you to be able to take the one-piece rear main seal and slide that over top of the block where the two-piece main seal should work. So this rear main seal will not slide over top and cannot be used where you should have a two-piece rear main seal. So when you order your flywheel, you're going to have to know if you have the one-piece rear main seal or if you have a two-piece rear main seal, because there is a difference, and if you order the wrong one, you're going to have the wrong flywheel, and it will not interchange. That's one thing about Chevy small blocks that actually don't interchange. They made about everything customizable on them and interchangeable, but that rear main seal is one thing that is different. So you can get the larger diameter or the smaller diameter, but again, you have to match the one-piece rear main seal or the two-piece rear main seal. Otherwise, that's not going to work. Okay, so you can probably figure out you have 6 bolt holes and then 1 roll pin. And you look at the bolt pattern on your flywheel, you have 6 bolt holes and then 1 that just is kind of out of place. So that's for your roll pin there. So that's so you make sure that you get everything lined up, and it's kind of helps for assembly too, because you have this ridge that's right there that you can put the flywheel on, and then you line up your roll pin, and then all your bolt holes are lined up too. Okay, so once you get to this stage where you get your flywheel mounted in place, I just put 1 bolt in, I didn't use Loctite on it, but don't forget to use Loctite. I just put that one in so that I have it something to hold it into place. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and put the rest of the bolts in. I'm going to use Loctite on them so that I make sure that they stay in place, because if you torque them all down before you put the Loctite on, then you're stretching those threads out, and once they're stretched out once, you're basically ruining your bolt's integrity and longevity. And for a flywheel, something that's important like this, you don't really want to do that. So do it once and do it right, and then you don't have to worry about it. So I'm tightening down my flywheel bolts here. I'm doing it in 3 steps. Earlier I lied when I said I was going to do 20, 40, 60. My torque wrench starts at 30 foot-pounds, so I'm going to do 30, 46 because it's only 2 foot-pound intervals, and then 60. So I will do it in 3 steps still, and I will get up to 60, but I'm just doing it in a few more steps. But basically I'm using that star pattern, and I'm keeping that same star pattern when I'm restarting that with a higher torque. I have it tightened right down to 45 foot-pounds. This is where you might need a second person or to either hold the flywheel, again trying to keep this surface clean, or put a wrench on the front of the crank so that they hold the actual engine from turning over while you're trying to tighten the flywheel bolts. So you might need a second person. If you get lucky, you can hold it with one hand while you're turning the bolts over with the other hand, but just depends on how easy it is for your engine to turn over and whatnot, and what situation you're in. So hopefully you can get that done, but if you can't, you might need a second hand. Okay, so there we go. I got my 6 bolts installed, and I went over them again after I got up to 60 foot-pounds. I went over them again just to make sure, and I got maybe just a fraction of a little bit of movement out of one of them, which that could also be within the tolerances on the torque wrench, because it's not supposed to be right on every time. It's within 5 to 10%. So that's maybe where I'm getting my movement from, and so I'm going to let that go because it was just a very minimal amount. So my next thing, I guess, is I need to put in my pilot bearing or pilot bushing. So the flywheel's installed, and I just need to get that, waiting on the pilot bushing to come in, and then I'll be able to put that in, and then I will be putting on the pressure plate and clutch. Doing the pilot bushing install on my small block Chevy here, and first step for you is you got to get this the pilot hole cleaned out really well. So what I did is I used brake cleaner and just a shop towel, I guess, but I went in there and I cleaned it out. It was good, solid. I mean, I went in 2 or 3, 4 times trying to get as much of that gunk or rust or whatever's in there out of there, so I have a good solid clean surface to work with. And next step after that, basically I'm just going to take this pilot bushing here, line it up about as straight as I possibly can get it, and then I'm not doing anything very crazy, but just using a socket. I'm going to be pounding it in. Just give it a light little tap, and it should just go right in. You don't have to pound it very hard. And if you look deep in there, you'll see that ridge right there. Okay? So what that tells me, or tells you, is when you're pounding that pilot bushing in, you can pound that in up until you get to that ridge, which is going to be just barely inside the face of this second level right here. Or if you want, you can stop when you're flush with this face, but as long as you're into this face, and see, then once you get back in far enough, that's to stop you so you don't go in too far. So you get it at least flush with this face, but if you go past that and you hit that stop right there, that's fine too. Alright, and just a little bit more should be in all the way. Yeah, that should be good right there. Okay, so I got it all pounded in. and see right there, I pounded in until it was flush with this interface, so it's in far enough there, and I'm just going to put a little dollop of grease, just a little bit, in there as a kind of a lubricant for the transmission shaft there. And I guess the pilot bushing is installed for me, so next step I can go on to the clutch and pressure plate. So before I want to do the clutch pressure plate install, just one more time, even though you've even probably already cleaned off your flywheel, spray it off with brake cleaner one more time. Wipe it down really good. You want a really clean surface so that that grease isn't going to get onto your clutch there. Yeah, it can ruin it for you real quick. So clean off your flywheel again. Just make sure it's clean before you go to install your clutch. Doing the clutch and pressure plate installation here on the Impala, and I bought a new set of ARP pressure plate bolts. And whenever you buy something from ARP, whether that's head studs or flywheel bolts, pressure plate bolts, whatever, they're going to give you their own specs that don't meet the manufacturer's standards. They're going to give you their own specs for tightening torque. Now, they always give you the torque with ARP fastener assembly lube, and they'll send you that if you buy it in the kit. So use that and go by ARP's recommendations, because that's what they do, is they make fasteners for this type of situation. So my pressure plate bolts are 3/8 inch, and so with using ARP lube, that's 45 foot-pounds. So that's pretty simple. Just follow those steps, and I'm going to get started. Okay, so if you bought a new clutch pressure plate assembly like I did, then it should come with this clutch alignment tool. So basically what this tool is, you can kind of see the splines on there. It mimics the transmission shaft for you. So instead of having to use the transmission to line up your clutch and pressure plate, what you can do is you can just use this alignment tool, and that'll essentially allow you to bolt everything in so that when it comes time for the transmission, you don't have to worry about this clutch being in correct alignment, because it will already be in alignment. So then you can bolt everything up, torque it up, and then just slide the transmission into place already for you, and you just be able to bolt it on and it'll be good to go. Okay, so right now I got the clutch and pressure plate on there. I just have 2 bolts on it right now, just kind of halfway threaded in, just to hold it in place for me while I get all the other bolts aligned and put in. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bolts on, washers included with the ARP fastener assembly lubricant, and so I'll get that all put on, get them all hand tightened up at least, so it's all held tight, and then I'll go ahead and start torquing them down. Alright, so I have my bolts all put in place. I have my ARP assembler fastening lube all applied, and washers installed and everything. So these are all just hand tight, and that way it'll hold the clutch disc in place here. And once you get this all turned down, so that's all hand tight, all the bolts, can't tighten them anymore with your fingers, then you should be aligned and it should hold your clutch disc in place. So I'm able to pull this out fairly easy, and it should just slide right back in just like that. So the clutch disc should be aligned just like that, so that should be good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start torquing down in a star pattern. I'm going to go around. Basically, you want to get this down to torque really even here, and so what I've been doing is I've been going in a star pattern and just kind of going about 1 turn at a time per bolt. So 1 turn, 1 turn, 1 turn, 1 turn, 1 turn, 1 turn. Just a slow process, and you don't want to get too excited, because if you go one side too heavy, what you're going to do is you're going to have this clutch rock to one side, and it's going to be uneven. It's really easy to bend your clutch plate there if you go tighten one side down really tight and then do the other side. So that's why I'm just doing it, just a slow process, just in a star pattern, just 1 turn of the bolt at a time, and just kind of, it's taken a long time, kind of, I'm going over it quite a few times, but this way I know it's going to be evenly balanced and I'm not going to bend that clutch plate at all. So I'm just going to, it's just a slow process. I'm taking my time, but I'm just taking it down to that first spot of 15 foot-pounds of torque, and then after that I'm going to continue the process, depending on how much turns it is, to go to 30 and then to 45 foot-pounds. Alright, and there we go. I went around the whole clutch there 2 times, again at the max torque, 45 foot-pounds. So just to make sure that they were all tight. So as far as I see it, this clutch pressure plate assembly is installed. My clutch alignment tool just popped right out there, just real easy. So I'm not too worried about my transmission being able to go right in. So I think that's the next stage, so this should be good. So I'm going to go on to the next stage of putting the transmission in.